How did you first get into building virtual worlds or digital spaces? So I have a background in architecture, background in urban design, and I think this was back in 2020. I was very curious and exploring in the Metaverse, and I stumbled into the Museum of Crypto Art. And they were an institution that held a incubator that basically gave virtual land to artists and to architects like myself to build a scene in the Somnium space. And this became a kind of arts district. And for me, that was really my first kind of entry into virtual reality, which was, Somnium space, but also into this kind of community of builders that I was previously not as familiar with. And it was a just amazing, eye-opening experience for me, really set the stage for me to collaborate more deeply with Mocha, with Somnium space, and the Metaverse at large. And what is your creative process when you start a new world? My creative process typically revolves around jumping into a 3D environment and sketching in 3D. So adding shapes, adding different primitive geometries, almost like you would with sketching, you're kind of sketching basic kind of shapes or concepts to start. I really like to explore in 3D and start with sort of massing models. In architecture, it's very common to start with kind of study models, massing models, get an idea for the form that you want to build, and iterate on ideas in that way. And I do that pretty often in a Metaverse setting as well, because it's a big virtual canvas and you can plop anything in there and experiment around. Okay, what's one thing beginners should focus on instead of trying to build everything at once? Definitely related to the previous question, jump right in. Put yourself in the scene. I think a big part of not getting overwhelmed in a way with an infinite canvas is actually putting yourself there in front of it. It gives you scale, it gives you kind of orientation and direction. And seeing myself or an avatar in a scene as I'm kind of building around it, I think that adds a lot of color to the direction that the build takes. For me, that's always very important, especially coming from my world, is to see what you're building from the perspective of the person inhabiting it. And in the architecture world, it's very common to draw things from up top, or a what's called an axonometric perspective or isometric, and you see yourself from very far away. But people don't inhabit buildings as from this kind of bird perspective. So you really want to be on the ground level and see what that building is like. I think that adds to it a lot and guides your direction. What's a mistake you made early on that you learned from? One mistake, I think, I made many mistakes, but I think one thing is trying to force a complicated geometry into a low poly environment. By that I mean the Metaverse has limitations. And in the beginning, I really tried to force feed it really complicated shapes. But what I should have done early on and really tried to understand better is that, the Metaverse is a medium. The low poly kind of requirements, that's part of the territory. That's part of the vernacular of the world you're building in. And that is an asset if you treat it correctly. I think trying to load in the most complicated, beautiful looking thing that you can create doesn't perform well. The Metaverse might break. So I think it's important to look at those requirements as guidelines and as rules for the world. And I think early on, I really thought this was ruleless and you could just load anything, but quickly realized that you'll break stuff that way. And it's more fun and more interesting, I think, to use the rules of the land and build into them. How do you use existing tools, models, or references when you build? I'm a big proponent of open source, a big proponent of CC0 models. All of the 3D architecture that I build, they are open source. So I really love remixing things. I really love collaborating with others to build and build upon different 3D models. So I really think it's important to share in that way and to create something a little bit different than what we have in the real world, which is usually a lot less cooperative. For me, using existing tools and models and working with others to get, to explore a space is really critical. What's your favorite part of building in Hyperfy? I think my favorite part of building in Hyperfy is the open and collaborative nature of it. It's all very live. It's like it's a real-time sandbox where anyone can pop in and out at the same time, and you're building together, you're sharing ideas together. It's a live, immersive website. So instead of people hopping onto a web page and you can see a little cursor, you can see an avatar and they can add things to the scene. They can add their own buildings and you have a conversation visually that way. I think that's really sparked my excitement again in the metaverse, is seeing people build collectively and having this kind of incredible cooperative canvas that you could just build on together. How do collaboration and shared worlds change the creative process for you? I would say that collaboration really opens your mind to the possibilities of what you can build. This is the benefit of these kind of open metaverse worlds, is you really get to learn intimately from one another, and it informs your practice. It informs what you build. That's critical. I think that's so different than the real world in some cases, because people all too often build in silos and build in isolation. But I think these shared worlds really enhance the creative process, and especially for artists and architects, I think it enhances the way that you create. It challenges and provokes you to create differently and build more interesting, engaging things that are informed by the people who use them and not really built away in isolation. What would you say to students who think they're not creative or not technical? I would say that first, I don't believe you. But second, I think that the tools that exist now are just so incredible that you really have the ability to break through any sort of mind block that you have. If you don't feel that you're technical, you don't feel that you're creative, the tools that exist now between AI and between virtual world building and other things, you can really dissolve those barriers. Because I don't think of myself as a technical person, but I find myself doing technical things all the time, or just being surprised that something is more technical than I realize. I think you just simply dive in and enjoy the process and enjoy learning from one another. And I think that's a way of kind of breaking that barrier down. Why is experimentation more important than getting things perfect when building worlds? Oh, that's great. I think experimentation is the built world. Like, I come from a world of buildings and cities which are imperfect. They're also in process. They're never complete. So I think we should treat the metaverse in the same way, that it's not a finished product. It's not meant to be built and polished and complete when it's launched. It's meant to be a living, breathing virtual environment. And I think experimentation is critical in terms of iterating on worlds. That's one of the biggest assets of these metaverse environments, is you can iterate on them and continuously improve them. So I don't believe in a perfect virtual world. I think what's perfect is the process, and embracing that as part of the medium and in part of the way that you create. How can building virtual spaces help people tell stories or explore ideas? Building and communicating in an immersive virtual environment really adds to the flavor, the color, the senses in a way that a 2D web page just can't do. I think it allows you to tell stories in a way that isn't linear, You don't have to scroll up and down a web page. The way we told stories previously is you read a blog post, or you go on a website and you scroll down, and by the time you're at the bottom, you've read the story. But in a virtual world, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, but virtual. You can go any direction you choose. There are no limits there, and you can observe anything that draws your attention most. So it's a much different, more immersive, more rich kind of way of storytelling that I think really breaks free from the limits of 2D websites. I think with virtual world storytelling, you can really allow people to become part of the story. And that's what's so exciting about these kinds of spaces is you invite the participant, invite the user, invite the visitor in to make their mark. And that's a pretty special thing. What skills do you think students practice when they build worlds, even if they don't realize it? I think students practice communication, and I think they practice, it's a kind of empathy and world building, I think, where you're building in reaction to someone. You're, as I said before, you're building with the people that visit your space more intimately than you would, in the real world. If you're building a brick and mortar or concrete or wood building, it's permanent. It's built to last 100 years. It's not really engaging. It's not engaging people in the same way as if it were made in clay or made in sand. And I think that's kind of what we're doing in the metaverse. Is I think of the materials more as clay and sand because they have to be iterated on very quickly. They're not as permanent. They're more free-flowing with the conversation. So I think students are really practicing different skills of communication and different skills of kind of empathy as they learn how to build with this new medium. It's not something we really have all the words for yet, but in my mind, it's a very different, because it's not permanent, your design language is different. What's one thing you wish teachers knew about creative technology tools like Hyperfy? I would wish that teachers knew and use more things like Hyperfy because it's open source for one. And it's also this kind of just really easy to use sandbox. Again, back to the sandbox metaphor, this is a really interesting way to work collectively. I come from a world in urban design, especially, where you have what are called community charrettes. So when you're designing or proposing a building or a new project in a community or a neighborhood, you have something that's called a charrette, where you meet with the community, you all gather around a table, and you take out tracing paper, you take out pens and pencils and regular paper, and you draw collectively. And you come up with an idea of what you want that new building to look like together. And I think Hyperfy functions very similarly. I think it's an environment, it's a big open canvas where anyone can come in and impart their own ideas in a world, and that ultimately shapes the collective vision of the neighborhood you're building together. I think that's incredibly powerful as a resource for teaching and for learning. So it's something that I think should be used more often in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of experimentation, world building together. It's a really immersive tool, and I think it is very much a charrette. It's a metaverse charrette tool.